My shift at Walmart had just started. It was late, around 11:30 p.m. Most of the customers had left, leaving the store eerily empty. I didn't mind, I preferred the quiet. I was used to working late-night shifts, usually as a stocker or cashier, but tonight felt different. Something was off. The store was unusually still, and the hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed louder than normal. I was assigned to the electronics section, near the back of the store, where the TVs and gadgets lined the shelves. There was a man browsing in the aisle when I first walked over, just standing there staring at a flat-screen TV. His posture was strange, hunched, almost like he was trying to get a closer look at something in the reflection on the screen. I didn't pay much attention, though. Late-night shoppers could be odd sometimes, especially the ones who loitered for no reason. But there was something unsettling about him. He hadn't moved for at least 10 minutes, not even a shift in position. I figured he was probably just tired or a little strange, maybe waiting for someone. I went about my work, restocking shelves, but I kept glancing back at him. I noticed something strange, he never seemed to blink. Not once. And that's when I realized he wasn't even looking at the TV anymore, he was looking directly at me in the reflection. I froze. His face was emotionless, but his eyes were full of something I couldn't name. They looked cold, empty. Like he wasn't even human. I tried to brush it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. Maybe it was the lack of sleep getting to me. But something gnawed at me, pulling at the back of my mind. "Can I help you find anything?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond at first, just continued staring at me through the reflection. I was starting to feel uncomfortable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned to face me, his eyes still locked on mine. "No," he said, his voice low and rasping. "Not yet." That was it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. But I had a job to do, and I couldn't just walk away from the section. I turned my back to him and began sorting the display of wireless speakers. That's when I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like a faint scratching noise. It was coming from behind the shelves. I felt a chill run down my spine. I glanced over my shoulder. The man was gone. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. Had he left? No, something was wrong. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow. Not the typical kind, but one that moved. Something was behind the shelving unit, barely visible. Slowly, I crept closer, hoping it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But when I reached the corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A hand, pale and bony, reached out from the darkness behind the shelves. I backed away quickly, my heart racing. But it wasn't over. The hand wasn't alone. There was something else, something tall and unnatural. It was as though it was hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet as the hand slowly retreated into the darkness. The shadow that had been lurking behind the shelf seemed to stretch, shifting unnaturally, as though it wasn't confined by the normal rules of light and space. My heart hammered in my chest, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. The air in the electronics section felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing against me, suffocating me. I wanted to run. I should have run. But something kept me rooted to the spot, something that gnawed at the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just fear, it was an overwhelming sense that if I turned my back, something far worse would happen. I kept my eyes fixed on the shelves, the faint scratching sound still lingering in the air. The overhead lights flickered for a moment, casting long, disjointed shadows across the aisle. For a second, I thought I saw movement, just at the edge of my vision. But when I focused on it, nothing was there. My hands were shaking, but I had no choice. I had to find out what was going on. I carefully approached the section where I'd seen the shadow, every step feeling like it took me deeper into a nightmare. The aisle was dark, unnaturally so. It was like the light couldn't reach certain parts of the space, as if something was deliberately blocking it. As I reached the corner where the shelves met, the temperature seemed to drop. I could see my breath misting in the air, despite the store's climate control. That wasn't normal. Walmart never had temperature issues like this. The chill crept up my spine, and I felt something shift in the air, something alive, and it wasn't human. The whisper came next. It was so soft I almost thought I imagined it, but then it came again, this time clearer. A voice, almost too quiet to make out, as if it were speaking directly into my ear from behind me. "Turn around," I froze. The voice was like sandpaper scraping against my thoughts. I didn't want to turn around. I knew something was behind me, but I couldn't bring myself to look. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now, suffocating. The air seemed thick with it, and I couldn't tell if the whisper was real or just a figment of my imagination. Then, something touched my shoulder. I didn't scream. I couldn't scream. It was as though my body had forgotten how to move or react. I felt a cold, clammy hand press against the fabric of my shirt, like ice on my skin. It lingered for a moment too long before retreating. I turned around, but there was nothing there. The aisle was empty. The shadows looked like shadows, the shelves just shelves. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I wanted to run. I should have run. But I couldn't, not yet. My curiosity, or maybe something worse, kept me rooted in place. From the corner of my eye, I saw it. Movement. A shape, almost human, but twisted. It was at the far end of the aisle, crouching in the darkness. It wasn't the man from before. This thing had no face. There was just a patch of blackness where its head should have been, and it was watching me. My breath hitched in my throat as it slowly began to move towards me, gliding silently over the floor like a shadow coming to life. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't human. I could feel the wrongness radiating off of it, like it was some kind of parasite that had found its way into the world of the living. I knew I had to get away. But my legs wouldn't move. My body was frozen in place, unwilling to obey. And then, in a soft, guttural voice, it spoke again. "You should never have come back," the words echoed in my mind, a cold weight settling deep in my chest. "You should never have come back." The voice didn't sound like it was coming from anywhere nearby. It seemed to crawl under my skin, whispering directly into my mind. My heart raced, and I could barely breathe. The shadow creature, whatever it was still moving slowly towards me. My legs trembled beneath me, but I was rooted in place like a deer in headlights, caught in the gaze of a predator I couldn't see. The thing didn't make any noise, not even a shuffle of its feet across the cold linoleum floor. It just glided closer, its faceless head twisting in unnatural angles, as if the darkness surrounding it could bend to its will. I knew that if I didn't move, I'd be caught, dragged into whatever hell this thing had come from. The overwhelming sense of dread crept over me again, more suffocating than ever before. But my body was still frozen, paralyzed by the terror that had taken root deep inside. It was only when the lights overhead flickered again, this time more violently, that I found my voice. A broken whisper escaped my throat, who are you?" The thing didn't answer. Instead, it tilted its head sharply, and the low growl that rumbled from its throat sent ice through my veins. The growl wasn't animalistic, though. It was something older, darker, like the sound of an ancient creature that had been waiting for centuries to finally find its prey. In a split second, the creature lunged at me. The sudden movement was so fast, I didn't even have time to scream. It was upon me, its cold, shadowy limbs wrapping around me like chains, suffocating me in the darkness. I felt myself being pulled toward it, dragged into the void that surrounded it. I couldn't see anything except the thick blackness, the coldness pressing against my skin. I fought. I screamed. I kicked and struggled, but nothing I did seemed to slow it down. It was too strong. I felt my body being drawn further and further into the depths of whatever hell this thing had crawled from. Its fingers tightened around my wrist, and I could feel the chill of its touch, like it was draining the warmth from my body. My vision blurred, and my breath came in short, frantic gasps. But then, just as I thought I couldn't fight anymore, a sharp crack echoed through the darkness, followed by the sound of something falling. The grip on me loosened, and I was pulled back, away from the creature. I hit the ground hard, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear my vision, and saw a shadowy figure standing over me, another person. It was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded Walmart uniform. His face was unfamiliar, but there was something in his eyes that was eerily calm, like he had seen this all before. "Get up," he ordered, his voice rough but determined. "You're not safe here." I didn't question him. I didn't have time to. My body reacted before my mind could process the words. I scrambled to my feet, trying to ignore the dizziness that was threatening to overtake me. He motioned quickly for me to follow him, and without thinking, I obeyed. We dashed down the aisle, past the electronics section, into the darker, more deserted areas of the store. I could still feel the creature's presence behind us, though. It wasn't gone. It was still watching, waiting for the moment to strike again. We reached the back of the store, near the employee-only section. The man stopped abruptly, pressing his back against the wall as if listening for something. I looked around, my pulse racing. There was a door ahead of us, an exit. But it was too far. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a small break room in the corner. The door creaked loudly as he pushed it open. "Stay here," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Don't make a sound. Don't open the door unless I tell you." I nodded, fear flooding my veins. The man disappeared back into the dark hallway, leaving me alone in the tiny room. I could hear him moving quickly through the store, but my mind was spinning. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. I stood by the door, listening for any sign of what was going on. The silence was oppressive, like the entire store was holding its breath. But then, a voice, a different voice this time, came from the other side of the door. It wasn't a whisper. It was loud. "You can't hide from it. It knows you're here." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I stepped back from the door, my mind racing. Something terrible was happening, and the man who had saved me, he wasn't here to protect me. He was part of something else. Something far darker. I was trapped. The words from the voice on the other side of the door lingered in my mind like a poison. "It knows you're here." I stood frozen in the small break room, trying to steady my breath. The darkness outside the room felt like it was closing in on me. Every second seemed to stretch, and the air felt heavy, as if something was waiting for me to make a mistake. The strange, cold sensation that had gripped me earlier now seemed like a distant memory. I could feel the warmth leaving my body again, replaced by a growing sense of dread that I couldn't shake. I looked around the break room, searching for anything that could help, but the room was bare. A couple of old chairs, a small refrigerator, and a stack of empty boxes. Nothing that could fight back whatever was lurking in the store. I wasn't sure how long I stood there. It felt like hours. Every sound outside seemed amplified. The occasional creak of the old building, the soft hum of the air conditioning, but nothing concrete. Nothing solid to cling to. The store was a labyrinth of shadows now, a place where reality itself seemed to bend. Then, I heard it. A knock at the door. I froze. My pulse shot into my throat as I struggled to remain still. The knock came again, harder this time. "Let me in." The voice was the same as before, cold and unsettling. I stayed silent, but my instincts screamed at me to run, to get out, to leave whatever was out there behind. But how could I? I didn't even know where to go. The door creaked, and I realized it had started to open. It wasn't the man who had rescued me. It was something else. It wasn't a physical push or an external force, it was as if the door itself had been pulled open by invisible hands. I backed away, my heart hammering, but my legs refused to move. I had to think, to act, but my mind was clouded with fear. The door opened fully, revealing the hallway outside. But the hallway was empty. No sign of the man. No sign of anything at all, except the darkness. I didn't trust it. I couldn't trust it. "It's waiting for you," the voice hissed again, low and guttural. This time, it came from somewhere behind me. I spun around, the cold air biting into my skin. The shadow was there, standing at the far corner of the room. I couldn't make out its shape entirely, but I could feel its presence like a weight pressing on my chest. It didn't move, but I could tell it was watching me. It knew me. And it wasn't alone. Suddenly, the man, the one who had pulled me into the break room, appeared behind the shadow. His face was blank, his eyes empty, but there was something different about him now. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like he wasn't fully in control of his own body. "You shouldn't have trusted me," he said, his voice hollow, like he was speaking through a veil. "There's no way out." I recoiled, my body shaking with panic. "What do you mean?" I stammered. "What's going on here? What's after me?" He stepped closer, but his eyes were now completely black, voids that seemed to suck all light from the room. There was no humanity in him anymore. "It was always here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Waiting for new souls. You think this is just a Walmart? You think it's just a store? No. This place is cursed. It has always been cursed." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just some random encounter. It wasn't some maniac hiding in the store. This thing, whatever it was, had been there for a long time, feeding on those who wandered too far into its grasp. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. "What do you want from me? Why me?" The man didn't answer. Instead, his lips curled into a twisted smile, and his hands reached out, but it wasn't to grab me. He was offering something. I could feel it. A deal. A price. The room began to change. The walls seemed to breathe. The flickering overhead lights went out completely, leaving us in total darkness. My senses were heightened, my heart beat loud in my ears. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, the creature, the one that had been lurking in the shadows, stepped forward. It wasn't faceless anymore. It had a face, but it wasn't human. The eyes were too large, the skin too pale. Its mouth was wide, with too many sharp teeth. It was smiling, or perhaps it wasn't, but its expression twisted as if it could taste my fear. "You came too late," it rasped, its voice sending a shiver down my spine. "But we can still make a deal." I could feel the air thickening around me, my entire body frozen in place, locked in the grip of an unspoken agreement. It was then that I realized the horrible truth. There was no escape. Not for me. Not for anyone who had ever set foot in this cursed place. The creature's smile stretched wider, its face twisting grotesquely. My body trembled as I tried to force myself to speak, but my voice failed me. I was trapped not only by the dark, oppressive space of the break room but by something far worse, the suffocating weight of whatever ancient force had taken hold of this place. The man, the one I had thought was my savior, stood motionless now, his once human form no longer recognizable. His eyes were empty voids, like he had become part of the darkness itself. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was complicit. "You don't have to make a choice," the creature hissed, its voice sending a wave of icy terror through me. "You already have." I didn't understand. What choice? What did it want from me? My mind screamed for answers, but the creature only watched me, its grotesque smile now a permanent fixture on its face. The man's hollow voice broke through the silence, murmuring, "It's too late for questions. You're part of the store now. Part of the price we pay, for survival." I backed away, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. My breath came in short, panicked bursts, and every instinct screamed at me to run. But the creature was blocking the door, and I knew there was no way out. No escape. "You're already one of us," it whispered, moving closer now, its black eyes gleaming with a sickening hunger. "We're all part of the deal. Those who stay, those who work, they are never really free. Walmart, it is more than a store. It is a prison. A prison built on souls." I shook my head, trying to comprehend its words, but the more I listened, the more they twisted together into something dark, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand at attention. The building was never just a retail space. It was a gateway, a place where people came in, worked, lived, and were slowly consumed by something far older and more powerful than anything they could ever understand. "You can't leave now," the creature rasped, almost gleeful. "It's part of you. You always had a choice, but now that you've crossed the threshold, there's no going back." The man's voice cracked, hollow as he added, "And you won't be the last. You'll watch it happen again and again, to the next shift, to the next victim, and the next, and the next." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I felt like I was drowning in the weight of this revelation. I hadn't been chosen. I hadn't made a conscious choice at all, it had chosen me. The store, this cursed place, had drawn me in. It had swallowed me whole without me ever realizing it. All those hours of work, the monotony, the customers, the shelves, the aisles, they weren't normal. They were designed. Designed to keep us trapped, to lure us deeper into the shadows. The air around me thickened. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears as the creature stepped closer, its breath like the smell of rot. The room was closing in on me. What do you want from me?" I gasped, desperation crawling into my voice. "Your soul," the creature crooned. "Or what's left of it." Its hand reached toward me, long, claw-like fingers extending like tendrils of darkness. I wanted to scream. To run. But something told me it would be useless. There was no running, no escape. This thing, this place, it had already claimed me. But just as its fingers grazed my arm, something unexpected happened. A bright light filled the room, blinding me for a moment. I shielded my eyes, trying to make sense of what was happening. The creature hissed, recoiling from the light, its form writhing in pain. A voice, a real voice this time, not the hollow one that had spoken before, rang out, filled with authority and fear. "Get away from her." It was the man. The same man who had brought me into this nightmare. But now, he was different. His body was still pale and lifeless, but there was a flicker of something familiar in his eyes. A flicker of humanity. He stood in the doorway, holding a small, glowing object in his hand, like a beacon of light in the otherwise oppressive darkness. The creature let out a screech, the noise deafening. It shrieked in fury as the light from the man's hand burned brighter, pushing it back. "This is not your claim anymore," the man said, his voice steadier now. "You're done feeding on the living." I didn't understand. How was he suddenly fighting back? How had he found whatever power he was using to stand against the darkness? But I didn't have time to question it. The creature was shrieking, thrashing violently, trying to escape the light. And then, in the blink of an eye, the man turned to me, his gaze filled with urgency. "You need to leave. Now. While you still can." The creature let out one last scream of fury before it vanished into the shadows, retreating deeper into the store. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was silence. I didn't wait for another second. I ran. I bolted out of the break room, past the darkened aisles, through the endless shelves that had once felt like a labyrinth, but now felt like a passageway leading to freedom. The door to the exit was ahead of me, just within reach. But before I could reach it, the man called out, his voice just loud enough for me to hear. "Don't think it's over," he warned. "Walmart, it will always call you back." I didn't turn back. I couldn't. My feet pounded against the floor as I ran through the exit doors, into the cold night air, the parking lot empty and silent. I escaped. But deep down, I knew the truth. The store wasn't finished with me. Not yet. And it never would be. I thought I was free. I thought the nightmare had ended when I stepped into the cold night air, away from the cursed walls of Walmart. I thought I had escaped whatever darkness lurked inside, waiting to consume everything and everyone in its grasp. But that was just the beginning. I didn't go back to work the next day. I couldn't. The images of the creature, the man, the whispering voices, they haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the darkness closing in, the eyes of the creature staring at me from the shadows, the man's hollow gaze following me wherever I went. I tried to tell myself it was all just a bad dream. A nightmarish hallucination brought on by exhaustion, stress, or some strange combination of both. But deep down, I knew the truth. I felt it. Walmart wasn't finished with me. At night, I would hear noises in my apartment, scratching at the walls, soft knocks on the door, a faint whispering that always seemed to come from the corners of the room. The shadows in the corners of my apartment would stretch and twist, like they were alive, like they were reaching for me. It started slowly, subtle at first. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, convinced I had heard someone whisper my name. But every time I checked, the apartment was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Something was watching me. I tried to get help. I went to a therapist, hoping they could tell me I was just losing my mind, that it was all some post-traumatic stress from the store. But when I tried to explain, when I mentioned the things I'd seen, the creature, the man, the store, they just stared at me like I was crazy. I knew I wasn't. I knew what I had seen, what had happened to me. It wasn't until a week later that it started again, the dreams. I was back in the store, walking down the aisles. The lights above flickered, and the air was cold, like it had been that night. I could hear the soft scratching sounds in the background. The aisles stretched on forever, twisting and turning like a maze. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. The man. He was standing at the end of the aisle, staring at me with those empty, black eyes. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The darkness around him seemed to swallow the light, making him look even more like a ghost. He pointed toward the back of the store, toward the employee-only area. And then I saw it. The creature. It was standing there in the shadows, its twisted, grotesque body shifting as it glided silently toward me. Its eyes gleamed, black and hungry, and it smiled, a smile that seemed to stretch too wide, full of sharp, jagged teeth. "You belong to us," it hissed. "Walmart always calls. And it always collects." I woke up with a jolt, gasping for air, my sheets soaked with sweat. But this time, it was different. The room was cold. A chill I couldn't explain hung in the air, and I could swear I heard the faintest scratch at the door. The knocking. Soft, insistent. Just like it had been in the dream. I wasn't imagining it. The whispers had returned, and this time, they weren't just in my head. They were coming from inside my apartment. The shadows in the corners of the room were darker, more solid, like something was living in them. I rushed to the door, my hands shaking as I reached for the handle. But before I could open it, the knocking stopped. I stood there, listening, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I heard it. A voice. "We're waiting for you." I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. The figure, the man, was standing there in the doorway. His face was still pale, his eyes still empty and black, but now there was something more. A dark aura surrounded him, an unsettling presence that made my skin crawl. "You can't escape," he whispered, his voice low and cold. "Walmart will always find you. No matter where you go, it will call you back. It never forgets." I backed away slowly, my mind racing, but there was no way out. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows stretching further, enveloping me. "No one leaves," the man said, his voice now a distorted echo, like he was being pulled away by something dark. "Walmart is eternal. And you belong to it." And then, with a final, chilling whisper, he vanished. I ran as fast as I could, out of my apartment, into the streets, the air suddenly oppressive, thick with dread. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't escape the feeling that Walmart's dark force had already found me, that the call was too strong for me to ignore. But when I turned around, I saw it. The store. In the distance. The glowing Walmart sign flickered like a beacon, almost as if it was waiting for me. Waiting for my return. I knew then that it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered in my chest as I stood in the middle of the street, my body frozen, staring at the Walmart sign in the distance. The store loomed like a dark monolith, its flickering lights casting an eerie glow that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The whispering voice, the man, the creature, everything I had escaped, everything I had hoped to leave behind, was calling me back. I knew it in my bones. I had to run. I had to keep going. But something kept pulling me toward it. Something darker, something stronger than my fear. I turned and started walking, slowly at first, as if my legs had a mind of their own. Every step felt like a betrayal of my sanity, every breath a confirmation that I was walking right back into the hell I thought I had escaped. The night air was thick with dread, and the closer I got to the store, the more the darkness pressed in. The familiar sounds of the city, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, faded away. All I could hear was my own footsteps, pounding in the silence. And the whisper. It had come back. "Welcome home," it breathed, the voice like ice in my veins. I reached the parking lot. The Walmart doors were open, just like they had been the night I first stepped inside, the night everything changed. The entrance beckoned like the mouth of a beast ready to swallow me whole. The once familiar hum of the store now sounded like a growl, something alive and hungry. I didn't want to go inside. I tried to resist. I tried to turn away, but the store had already claimed me. The shadows that had once surrounded the man now engulfed me, pulling me forward, tugging me into their dark embrace. When I crossed the threshold, I felt it, that chill, that suffocating, all-consuming cold. It wrapped around me like a vice, crushing the air out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The store knew me. It had always known me. "You came back," the voice whispered, a sickening sweetness to its tone. "You belong to us now. Forever." The shelves stretched out in front of me, the aisles endless, just as they had been in my dream. The lights flickered above, casting long, distorted shadows on the floor. But this time, it wasn't just the store that felt wrong. It was me. I could feel the darkness seeping into my very soul, claiming every part of me. I tried to scream. I tried to run again, but my feet wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, unable to escape the pull of the store, the darkness that had sunk its claws into me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. The man. His face was twisted now, grotesque, a mockery of humanity. His body was like a shell, hollowed out, consumed by the store's malevolent force. He smiled at me, a smile that stretched too wide, too unnaturally, as though his jaw was about to split in two. "You never really left," he said softly, his voice warped, hollow. Walmart owns you now. And it always has. We're all part of it. All the workers, all the lost souls, we're its prisoners. I could hear the creature now, its low, rumbling growl filling the air. It was coming. It was already here, in the store with me, its shadow looming behind every shelf, behind every aisle. You belong to Walmart now, the man said again, his words final, cold. No one gets out. Not ever. And in that moment, I understood. I had never truly escaped. Walmart wasn't just a store. It was a prison, a living entity that consumed those who worked for it, who stayed too long. It waited, watched, and called out for the next victim. It claimed them, mind and soul, until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. I looked around the store, the aisles stretching endlessly in front of me. And then I saw it, the creature. The dark figure that had haunted my dreams, its face a shifting void of darkness, its eyes gleaming like pools of oil. It was standing at the end of the aisle, watching me, its twisted grin spreading across its face. I felt its pull. I felt the hunger in its eyes. Come to me, it whispered, its voice like the sound of crackling fire. You'll never leave again. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to scream. But there was nothing left. I was already too far gone. And as the creature stepped toward me, its cold hand reaching for me, I knew the truth. Walmart had won. It always wins.